I mean, no spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live, episode number 157. Cancelling elections, banning free speech through a backdoor blasphemy law, locking up critics of the state for independent journalism or social media posts. Yes, the UK has morphed into a dictatorship under Slippery Starmer, and Nigel Farage is now calling out the horrifying reality.
Elections are cancelled. Now, I thought that only dictators cancelled elections, but no, this is the connivance of a now terrified Labour Party, and boy, didn't we see that today at Prime Minister's questions. And I was being shouted down from all sides. It was almost like old days in the European Parliament. I was thoroughly enjoying myself.
But before that today, you may have just heard the gutless snake Slippery Starmer has made a secret visit to Southport to avoid the scrutiny of a furious community. That is the only picture of him there. His secret plan was rumbled by the journalist Isabel Oakeshott. And in my digest next, I'm going to express solidarity with the people of that broken community after they were so badly let down by the authorities over Axel Rudikabana. Then my superstar panel weigh in, host of X Uncensored on Spaces, the political commentator Charlie Sansom, and the journalist Luca Watson, author of Luca's Substack. Also coming up on the show today, Newsnight defies the rest of the British bashing corporation and finally covers Keir Starmer's lockdown scandal as questions go over this relationship with his female, glamorous voice coach. And a TV news catfight breaks out as axed Sky News presenter Kay Burley trades blows with Camilla Tominey of GB News. Oh my goodness. We've got to have some fun today, and that is certainly the moment that we will do so. Then in the uncancelled after show on Substack, a legal disaster for Prince Harry with his immigration documents closer to release as Meghan Markle's Instagram video is branded her biggest PR disaster yet. We're across all of the royal news with YouTube sensation, according to Taz. Obviously, we broadcast the after show on Substack. www.outspoken.live is where you can sign up completely for free. Then, at the end of the show, we'll reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. But hopefully you're working it out by now. Union jackass is down to you. You can vote in our live chat on YouTube right now. And goodness me, great nominations from you today via the Dan Wootton Outspoken Club on X. So, nominee 1, Rachel Reeves. This nomination was from Amanda Louise for ruining our economy. Yeah, that sounds like a good reason to me. Nominee 2, Kemi Badenoch. Northie Vitch was the nominee here, and the nominator, here. And that was for doing the least she possibly could at PMQs yesterday in regards to Starmer's lockdown breaches. And nominee 3, probably one close to my heart, a certain Ms. Markle, nominated by @JFDTA for her stupid Billie Eilish t-shirt Instagram post, just so tone deaf, you say. So get voting now in the live chat. Enter your comments during the show. I'll read out some of the most dramatic, some of the most controversial at the end of the show. Don't worry, if you disagree with me, you can always tell me. But now, let's go. What a gutless weasel. Let me show you Slippery Starmer, Britain's deeply unpopular Prime Minister, visiting Southport today under the cloak of secrecy. This is, of course, the site of a massacre which opened Britain's eyes to the true horror of the failure of our establishment and authorities to keep our children safe. Not to mention the lengths the deep state, including the judiciary, will go to silence those brave souls who were prepared to question the official narrative. To this day, they still use the ridiculous line that Axel Rudikabana was not an Islamist terrorist. But we're awake to this now, which is why, despite being the leader of our country, the visit was conducted in complete secrecy and only revealed because of brilliant reporting by Isabel Oakeshott, revealed on Talk.
What can only be described as a secret visit to Southport this morning. This is just a day after the government ruled that Rudy Cabana's anti-terror case was closed prematurely. And the very next day, the Prime Minister visits Southport with none of the usual notice or press information that would go with a prime ministerial visit. We understand he visited a sixth form college where half the school was cordoned off and Range Rovers blocked the streets. And we've got some imagery there for those watching. The locals were not pleased. One local said, "How dare Keir Starmer come to our hometown of Southport? He kept that quiet. I wonder why. Straight to our college to talk lies to our children." Downing Street did not deny, we did call number 10, didn't deny the Prime Minister's whereabouts when...
And the rest of the MSM finally catching up on this story, and they're very furious at number 10 Downing Street about the fact that Isabel Oakeshott revealed it at all, which is completely bizarre and completely uncalled for. But I want to remind you why Starmer was too gutless to announce his visit at all. After all, he is the most hated man in Southport. And he has not forgotten what happened during his last visit there in the hours after the massacre.
How many more children have died in our streets, Prime Minister? How many more children? How many more children, Prime Minister? Are we going to do something?
Time to change, Starmer.
Come on, it's needed. How many more children? Is it mine next? What's shameful? Bye-bye. You got your photos, off you go. Make a real change, Prime Minister. Make a real change! Our children! Go away!
I just found out my friend's 9-year-old daughter.
A brave Prime Minister does not hide from his people. So here was Isabel Oakeshott breaking the news, which number 10, for some reason, claimed she was irresponsible for doing.
And my understanding, although this is not confirmed by Downing Street, is that he was there to talk to the parents of the victims, some of the victims of Axel Ruda Cabana. So we need to see if we can find out more about what that was about. But fascinating that number 10 is so twitchy, that they tried to keep this visit quiet. Why? Because the Prime Minister is despised in Southport. He has not been forgiven for how little time that he spent there in the immediate aftermath of those horrors. He has been resented for the way that he has been so disengaged. And a number of the relatives privately are fuming with the Prime Minister for the lack of interest, the lack of sympathy. They perceive that he just has done the barest of lip service on this front. So I suspect that this visit was an attempt to try to keep the families on side.
And the details actually got worse from Isabel. First, she revealed Starmer's likely mode of transport. You're not going to believe this. Did Keir Starmer take a private jet to Southport today? I'm only asking, and Downing Street is only not confirming or denying. Draw your own conclusions. Climate change only when convenient. And then, in the last hour, why is Downing Street furious that I revealed Keir Starmer's secret Southport visit? Apparently, they think it was irresponsible to report it. Say what? Number 10, do call me to explain. P.S. If you want to keep a meeting secret, maybe don't hold it in a sixth form college. The point is, Starmer is the Prime Minister. None of his visits should be secret. But what's very clear to me is that the deaths of those 3 beautiful girls still haunts Starmer and in the end will undermine his premiership. He is terrified of the families speaking out for good reason. Just like the victims of the Nottingham triple killer bravely have over the past 24 hours. And I have to be honest with you, I don't know how the families of Axel Rudy Cabana's victims can cope, knowing the very obvious systemic failures that caused their daughters to be killed or attacked in a way that will leave them haunted for the rest of their lives. Take the review released by the government yesterday. It was barely covered, actually, by the MSM, but it admitted that the Prevent Counterterrorism scheme should never have been prematurely closed in relation to Rudy Cabana, given the terrorist scumbag had already discussed the Manchester Arena bombing and stabbing people. Oh, and who was behind the Manchester Arena bombing at an Ariana Grande concert that killed and maimed young girls? That's right, ISIS. But no, of course, Rudy Cabana, even though we're told he's a practicing Muslim behind bars in Belmarsh, of course, he isn't an Islamist terrorist. This crime has torn the country apart, actually. But what a state we are in when our Prime Minister is too scared, too gutless, too weak to even show his face in Southport. Shame on the MSM who allow this farce to go on. Now, it's time for the Superstar Panel. And I am delighted to be joined today by Charlie Sansom, who is the host of X Uncensored on Spaces, and the journalist Luca Watson, who has been writing on Substack this week on this issue, and specifically the call by the Home Secretary to effectively remove sharp ends from knives as a potential solution to these crimes. So, Luca, let me kick off with you. What do you make of the fact that Starmer has visited Southport in a cloak of total secrecy? What's that about?
Well, I get it from his perspective, given how terribly it went last time he visited, that he doesn't want to cause another riot. He doesn't want another repeat of what happened during summer. And yet he feels perhaps a responsibility to visit the families, that they'll be outraged if he doesn't keep an ongoing relationship with them. So I think this is fundamentally defensive move and shows that he's scared. He's scared of the reaction that he would get if this was publicized and if people were expecting him when he got there.
Charlie Sansom, what do you make of it? Because I find it extraordinary that Number 10 Downing Street are somehow angry about Isabel Oakeshott revealing this news.
I think they want to control the narrative. They don't want any negative press, which is what they're going to get if they publicise that he's gone to Southport, because of what Luca said, how it went last time. I agree completely with what Luca said there. So I think that they're just looking at doing what they can behind the scenes for the family. And I'm sure the families don't appreciate it anyway, because why would they? It's been how long now? And he's shown no care at all for them. And that's how he's trying to control the situation. For me personally, I think if my daughter or anyone in my family was murdered in the way that these poor babies were, I wouldn't want to see him. I wouldn't want to see him at all.
No, I completely understand that. And I think what is so disgusting is that through a lot of this process, Charlie, he has hidden behind the families. He's almost used the families as a political tool to say, don't ask me about this because all I worry about is the families. But actually, it's not only the families that have been touched and horrified by this. It is the entire community of Southport who will never forget that moment when he turned his back on a grieving community. And you know what, Charlie? He went back to Number 10 Downing Street to attend a party. He didn't give a damn.
Not only that, but when he was in the area, I think it might have been on the same day, or he may have come back to Southport to give a reassurance to the Muslim community that he was going to help them. And whilst I'm not trying to say that people attacking Muslims is fair game, because it's not one person did this, not a whole community, but you do have to look at the bigger problem here, which is Islam on the whole. You cannot go and spend so much time focusing on the outside group than the parents themselves. It's just unfathomable. It's inconceivable, actually, that that would be good advice. Someone's told him to do that. Who would advise him to visit the mosque and not visit the families? As that video showed in your preamble to this subject, he laid his flowers, got his photo and went. He didn't do that at the mosque. He stuck around. He offered them money. Where's the compensation? Again, it's not going to bring back their children, but where is the same level of care for the victims of these crimes?
Yeah, I know. And there are so many different factors about Axel Rudikabana. And of course, what the authorities did and what Starmer specifically did was say, oh, we'll have a debate about this. We'll talk about it. Even Kemi Badenoch said the same thing. Oh, don't worry. We'll talk about this. We'll have a national debate. But really, that national debate never happened. Rudikabana pleaded guilty on the day of President Donald Trump's inauguration. There was a sentencing hearing on the Thursday where actually the mainstream media decided to cover up a lot of the horrors of his crime. Again, we were told that was because it was the family's wishes, but actually was that the case? And Luca still to this day, even though you have Suella Braverman, Robert Jenrick, Nigel Farage, there is a small handful of politicians and certainly commentators like myself, Douglas Murray, who have been prepared to say this man was an Islamist extremist. But actually, the vast majority of the mainstream media, the vast majority of the political class continue to live under this impression that, oh, no, we don't really know what caused this. He didn't seem to be driven by an ideology. The report yesterday showed that he was specifically looking into the Manchester arena bombings. It's like it wasn't a coincidence that this was a Taylor Swift dance class that he targeted.
Well, I think we shouldn't jump to conclusions because it also showed that he was interested in the IRA and Irish Republican bombings. And so he seems to be more of a sort of school shooter type of profile, like we see in the US, where it's just an act of nihilistic violence. It doesn't seem to be like he had any contacts with any sort of cells, Islamic cells, anything like that, which is what you saw in the Manchester case, where it was someone who's well connected within the Islamic State. He seems to be a lone wolf who had a fascination with violence. And of course, we've seen in recent years, where has a lot of violence been coming from, where have a lot of attacks been coming from Islamic radicals. And so he was drawn to those cases as well. So I think it's reasonable for politicians, for others to not speculate too much, given that we don't definitively know that this was motivated by Islamist ideology. We do know that this is a man, or a boy at the time, now a man, who was obsessed with violence, who on repeated occasions told people that he wanted to hurt others. He actually did hurt someone. He hit someone with a hockey stick whilst he was carrying a knife. So I think the real story here is it's not really about ideology per se, because that's still an open question. It's about why was a man who showed time and time again that he was intent on doing violence, that he wanted to hurt people, who was going around with weapons, why was he allowed to continue to be free, not locked up in either a prison or some sort of psychiatric unit before he could carry out this terrible attack?
Well, indeed. But Charlie, I would put 2 points in regards to that. Firstly, how do you then explain the fact that he is practicing at mosque behind bars in Belmarsh prison, where the other prisoners, it's well known that he has converted to the Islam religion? And secondly, the reason that Prevent seemed to give up on him was because they said exactly what Luca was saying. Oh, he's just matching a school shooter profile. Actually, he's looking at all of these different types of ways of killing people. And that was almost the fact they hid behind.
Well, that makes him more unpredictable and therefore more dangerous, in my opinion, because at least with certain ideologies, you can predict where they're going to go and what they're going to do and how they feel about certain issues and certain things in our society. And to touch on what Lucas said a moment ago about it's wise not to jump to conclusions, I do agree with that sentiment. But 9 times out of 10, actually, I'd extend that. 99.9 times out of 100, it always ends up being Islamic influenced. And that's why people jump to conclusions that they do. And very rarely are those people wrong? So there is an issue with Islam in this country. There's an issue with Islam in the West in general. And I think that the politicians need to be honest about that. They won't be, but they should be. And even the ones that we hope would be can't be honest about it because they know that there's a game to be played with politics. And unfortunately, that's why these things happen, because politicians play the game. They don't follow the principle of looking after their people. They follow the principle of looking after themselves and their parties, which is why we find ourselves in these situations time and time again.
Yes, and having pointless conversations. So the conversation after the death of David Amess, even though he was killed by an Islamist extremist, provably, was, oh, isn't it terrible that people are mean to MPs on social media? That had nothing to do with it. And Luca, you have written a very good piece for The Critic magazine this week on the issue of knives, because you have Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, seemingly to take seriously the suggestion from Idris Elba, who, by the way, I'm sure his heart is in the right place. He's a very nice guy, but he's an actor, right? He's a lovely actor. I really don't necessarily think we should be listening to him on this. But he is effectively saying, oh, let's get rid of sharp blades from kitchen knives. And that's the solution to this problem. And you've written for The Critic saying, don't blame knives for knife crime. Do you just want to explain your thesis behind this?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned with the case of David Amess as well, we see time and time again, we have these horrible attacks that often attention is diverted to different places, to inanimate objects, in this case, knives, instead of looking at what the root cause of these issues are, which are the people carrying out these attacks. And with David Amess, it was obviously a radicalized Islamist that we have no doubt about. And yet somehow it became about social media and people trolling MPs and being mean to MPs online. Complete nonsense and complete distraction. And now with this case, we're seeing that there's now a war on kitchen knives, and the idea is you have to ban all knives which might have a pointed tip, or we need to make it far more difficult to go and buy a knife on Amazon or something like that. It's once again a distraction, a displacement activity from what the main issue is, and we see this now with the report from Prevent, which is that state authorities have failed to do their duty in protecting the public from dangerous people, from people who have shown they have a track record of violence. They know the state authorities that these people are dangerous. And instead of doing their job and locking these people up or whatever, they're making life for everyone else, for all of us, the law-abiding majority, far harder in these kind of incremental ways of making everything just a bit worse. Now, when you want to buy a knife, it's a bit more difficult. When you want to go to an art gallery, you have to queue up outside because you need to search your bags. And bit by bit, you see this kind of degradation of daily life where everything just gets a bit worse because the state won't do its proper duty, which is to enforce the law on that tiny, tiny portion of the population who is actually a threat to everyone else.
Exactly. And the point is, you've got to think about what is causing these people to use the knives. Breaking right now, Nigel Farage has accused the UK of becoming a dictatorship under the leadership of Keir Starmer after the ruling Labour Party decided to cancel a host of local elections in May, including, surprise, surprise, coincidentally, council areas like Labour-held Thurrock that were almost certain to be taken by the surging Reform UK party, which, by the way, in a new poll today, is now 4 points clear of Labour and the Conservatives. Farage, as I'm sure you can imagine, furious about this.
Elections are cancelled. Now, I thought that only dictators cancelled elections, but no, this is the connivance of a now terrified Labour Party, and boy, didn't we see that today at Prime Minister's questions. And I was being shouted down from all sides. It was almost like old days in the European Parliament. I was thoroughly enjoying myself.
Now, there are a whole load of councils having their elections postponed. Angela Rayner, of course, says, oh, this is because we're restructuring and there was no point of them having their elections. But I think it's very suspicious because there are a lot of big reform targets and big Liberal Democrat targets when you look at the areas. East Sussex, West Sussex, Essex, Hampshire, the Isle of Wight, Norfolk, Suffolk and Surrey. Watch Farage on this.
despite the fact we're a very happy, optimistic, forward-looking party, we are blimmin' angry this afternoon that 5.5 million people in this country are being denied their vote on May the 1st this year. And we've got counties like Surrey and East Sussex and West Sussex and Suffolk and Hampshire where elections have been cancelled. Where we are particularly aggrieved is in Norfolk, where we did win the seat of Great Yarmouth. Even under first past the post, we still run the seat of Great Yarmouth in the general election. And in Essex, where James McMurdoch and I both managed to win seats in Parliament, where we came second in 5 of the constituencies, and where the opinion polls now put us as favourites to win Essex County Council. But the voters in Essex and Norfolk and Sussex and Hampshire and the Isle of Wight and Thurrock and Suffolk and Norfolk, they will be denied the opportunity to vote on May the 1st this year. The elections are cancelled.
I mean, Charlie Sansom, whatever Labour's argument and whatever Angela Rayner's argument for doing this is, it is a horrifying look. It feels particularly anti-democratic. It makes us seem like a banana republic. Farage is right here, isn't he?
Potentially. I mean, this isn't the first time elections have been postponed. So there was postponement during COVID, which...
Yeah, I don't think that should have happened either.
No, I didn't think it should have happened, but I'm just saying there is a slight precedent for that because there was a health reason. This one, they don't have that get out of jail free card. They probably should go through with it. If the government do want to do local government reorganisation, which they have the power to do anyway, these elections won't change that. The only thing that it would change is perhaps the feeling about the changes that they do want to bring in, because if you do have reform taking councils left, right and centre, then they will have a bigger voice to say, actually, we want to have a say in how you're going to reorganise our areas. We want to have a say in us having a new mayor and, you know, breaking up different areas or combining areas into bigger ones as a whole. And that might be why they're trying to avoid it. Plus, the embarrassment will be that Labour will lose massively less than a year after they took power.
What do you feel about this, Luca Watson? Because I understand that you can always justify cancelling elections. However, there's a political revolution going on in this country, and these elections in May are far, far more meaningful than simply who is elected as councillors. It's going to be about the tectonic plates of British politics shifting. And of course, by cancelling a whole load of these areas that have a particular chance of Lib Dem or Reform UK success, just feels very anti-democratic to me.
Well, I understand people's concerns and why Nigel Farage would obviously be concerned about this. I think a few points. Firstly, Reform still has strongholds where elections will be held in Kent and in Lincolnshire, 2 areas where they're very, very strong. So they will still have the opportunity to contest elections in areas where they're strong. And secondly, I think this could actually play into Reform's hands because currently they have all the momentum, as you've said. They're the party that seem to be doing the best, now topping the polls. And if that trend continues, if they keep building momentum, they're only going to be in a stronger place come 2026 when these elections will take place instead of taking place in 2025. And so what you could see is that postponing them by a year plays into Reform's hands as they end up with far more councillors doing far better, getting far better results in an extra year's time as opposed to in just a few months' time.
Yeah, exactly. There is no turning off the tap of what is coming. And I mean, look, there's loads of signs that the Uni Party is in trouble and is really terrified. Couple of examples of this, which I want to look at. Firstly, this post from Zia Youssef. I mean, he was lolling at this, the chairman of Reform UK, with an article showing that membership is down 11% for the Labour Party since the election, with Starmer's lot losing a member every 10 minutes. Of course, that is completely counter to the types of membership numbers that Reform UK is receiving. And now we have the first big policy intervention from Kemi Badenoch, the Tory party leader, in terms of immigration. I find this hilarious because do you remember just a few weeks ago, she was saying, oh, you're not going to get any policy announcements from her. But the pressure is on. And Chris Mason, the political editor of the British Bashing Corporation, asked her about the Reform UK threat. Watch.
And we need to make sure that we are not creating an automatic right to British citizenship. It is something that's really special.
Are you panicking about Nigel Farage? Because when I speak to plenty of your colleagues privately, they are.
We need to make sure that we understand what is going wrong, and that is that we've just been kicked out of government. The public aren't just going to rush back to us because Labour is doing badly. We knew they'd do badly. We need to rebuild trust with the public. So of course they will put their vote with the protest party.
He's an existential threat, isn't he, to the Conservative Party, Nigel Farage?
Every party is an existential threat to the Conservatives. We are in a competitive political environment, and there's no point complaining about what other people are doing. We have to make sure that we're offering the best product. I think changing the rules to indefinite leave to remain is one of the ways that we can do that.
But Luca, like many 20-somethings, you have been very angry with the Conservative Party on the issue of immigration. You posted after that interview from Priti Patel, we covered it on the show last week, it was a real car crash, and you said from the Home Secretary who oversaw the creation of the Boris wave, they knew it was in their power to reduce migration, but they chose to increase it to record levels, intentionally breaking their manifesto promises. So can I safely assume that this new policy position from Kemi Badenoch, which is effectively not allowing low-skilled or low-paid people to stay in the country, is going to be easily dismissed by people who look at the damage that party has caused?
Well, yeah, it's one of those policies which is so obvious. You think, no, why is it taking you so long? I mean, not giving British citizenship to people who've come here and committed crimes, I think most people assume that's already the case. So it's a really obvious thing to do. But the problem that Kemi Badenoch's going to have, and the Tories have, is that every time they announce a policy like this, people will say, well, it's too late now. You had 14 years. You never did anything in those 14 years. You could have done it then. Instead, you did the opposite. You increased migration, made things far worse. And now you're struggling the polls. You start to think, oh, yeah, maybe we shouldn't give citizenship to criminals and stuff like that. It's just too late. And I think the public have got no patience. The Tories have zero credibility. As I said, on every election from 2010 all the way to 2019, they promised to lower migration. Every single time it went up. They have no credibility. And I think Kemi Badenoch is right. They are facing an existential threat. And I think if they do die out, not many people will miss them.
It's really interesting, actually, because, Charlie, and I'll get you to react to this, but firstly, let's just have a watch, because even diehard Conservatives are now making it pretty clear that no matter how much they're described as being far right or you know, whatever the MSM throws at them in terms of extremism, they are no longer prepared to just sit back and go with the status quo. And there was a really interesting call to LBC, the Labour broadcasting company, as I call it. Lewis Goodall of the fake news agents is filling in for the hard left James O'Brien this week. But he was left pretty stumped, actually, by this caller from a real loyal Conservative. And of course, Charlie, you used to be a loyal Conservative too. So I'll get your reaction, but first let's just have a listen.
Even though I do not like Nigel Farage, I'll probably vote for him because we've got hospitals falling apart, not enough doctors, nurses, schools falling apart, roads falling apart, not enough houses. That uncontrolled immigration is starting. We're not about stopping immigration. The country needs migrants, so I accept that. Some of the best people I work with are foreign nationals. But mass uncontrolled migration between 500,000 and 1 million people pound a year coming into the country when we ain't got enough homes for our own people.
Of course, Brian, in order to build those homes, we'll probably need migrants because we don't have enough people, we don't have enough builders and plasterers and all the rest of it. The housing sector have been very clear about that.
No one in their right mind wants to stop migration, even thinks it can be stopped. I'm on about mass uncontrolled migration. I keep getting called far right. I'm not. I'm right wing, always have been. I'm a Tory. But the more we get called the far right, extreme right, the more right we go.
Interesting, isn't it, Charlie? There's a change. And there is a change within Tories too.
there's been a change within the Conservative Party for a very long time. It's just that many of them haven't had the confidence to come out and say it. Now you've got Reform stealing a march. They now are being given that confidence to come forward and say what they really think. What I would say about what Lewis Goodall said is I watched that clip earlier on today and I thought to myself, we're going to need more migrants to build these houses. Well, how many illegals do we actually have in this country? What's the estimate right now currently? And if, we need more migrants, maybe they should stop working for Uber and delivering pizza and get on the building site then, but they don't. So where are they and what are they doing?
Yeah, the thing is that I think all of the parties are seriously concerned now, because even look at this from The Guardian. Group of Labour MPs urge Number 10 to be tougher on migration to fend off reform. But I guess the question is it too late? And Luca, based on what you said, I imagine you think it is too late for the Uni Party to convince you that they will ever take mass immigration seriously, given you only have to look at the demographic change and just the sheer horror that they have imported, both in terms of the types of people, but also just the sheer numbers over the past 3 decades.
Well, I think it's too late for the Tories. As I said, they've shredded their credibility on this issue. I don't think anyone's going to believe them that, for the 5th time, maybe this time they're being honest. Labour, they're in government. They can actually change things. They have the power. And you mentioned there the fact that some Labour MPs, especially those where reform came second, they can feel the pressure of feeling like it's now time to crack down on migration, bring the numbers down, which is what the vast majority of the British public want. Consistently in polling, it's shown that people want the numbers to come down. So it'd be a policy that's incredibly electorally popular. The question is the Labour Party, are the people in the Labour Party willing to do what the public want, or will they put their ideological motives first and continue on this mass migration experiment?
Well, I think they will pretend that they are not going to continue with the mass migration experiment. However, I just do not trust either Labour or the Conservatives to ever change it. We have been promised by both of those parties for 2 decades now, and it's a complete lie. Everything they told us was just a complete fallacy. Breaking right now, is there regime change at Newsnight? I only ask because the British Bashing Corporation, which has studiously ignored the absolute scandal developing over Keir Starmer, his lockdown rule breaches, the truth about his secret family and what exactly was going on with his glamorous actress vocal coach on Christmas Eve 2020, has finally been picked up by the BBC Two show. Now, I think the rest of the mainstream media has been utterly appalling on this story. Nothing to see here, says Beth Rigby of Sly News. Nothing to see here, says Paul Brand of Woke ITV. The types of journalists who absolutely hounded Boris Johnson over far, far less. And of course, you'll remember the biased hysteria from Emily Maitlis, the former presenter of Newsnight back in 2020. Watch.
Good evening. Dominic Cummings broke the rules. The country can see that, and it shocked the government cannot. The longer ministers and Prime Minister tell us he worked within them, the more angry the response to this scandal is likely to be.
And what was fascinating is one of our Outspoken favourites, Fat Faye, posted on X using those exact words. Keir Starmer broke the rules. The country can see that, and it's shocked the government cannot. The longer ministers and the Prime Minister tell us he worked within them, the more angry the response to the scandal seems likely to become. Dan Wootton, in Maitlis's own words. So, as you know, I've been tracking the mainstream media for a number of days to see if they will finally give this story the attention it deserves. Nothing from the main BBC News bulletins, nothing from Woke ITV, nothing from Sly News. But last night, and you know, even though I do believe the BBC should be defunded, I will give credit where it is due. And last night, Victoria Derbyshire, in stark contrast to the former presenter of that show, the hard left Emily Maitlis, broke ranks. Watch.
Next, did Sir Keir Starmer break lockdown rules as leader of the opposition when his voice coach came to his office to advise him on December the 24th, 2020, as he considered his response to Boris Johnson's Brexit deal? Well, the Prime Minister was asked at PMQs today to repeat his assurances that all COVID rules were followed back then by him.
That felt like a pretty major moment to me. There was more reporting from Newsnight.
It looks like there's no legal jeopardy to Keir Starmer, but what there is are political questions. Is Keir Starmer, who was so strict about being strict during COVID, that he really felt that a voice coach was an essential key worker during the pandemic? That's where this has ended up.
Melanie on, is Sir Keir Starmer a hypocrite?
He isn't. He was working very clearly.
Well, I mean, he is a hypocrite because it doesn't matter if you were working or not. That's not what the rules were about. We had to work from home. We were not allowed to see our colleagues. I won't bore you with all of that. But what I found most fascinating is the debate that followed was actually, and I can't believe I'm seeing this, totally fair and balanced, with Victoria Derbyshire putting the Labour MP on the spot for trying to defend the indefensible. Watch.
It's been very clear if he's ever accused of any wrongdoing that he'll tackle these things head on. You know, he has missed the rules on these things.
He chose not to say today again the rules were followed.
And well, I think that the indication from the fact that the police are not conducting any kind of investigation
because of the time limit, Melanie.
And the rules here that have just been explained do cover her in this instance.
Okay. The Met Police, Deanna Davison, will not be opening an investigation because 3 years has passed, as Nick explained. Is that the end of it?
I don't see how this is the end of it. I don't see as a politician when you make an entire part of your personality and political character being stickler for the rules. You can't be a lawbreaker and a lawmaker to then not pass the sniff test on something like this. I remember December 2020. I was in London moving flats completely on my own and I was due to go and see my family. London moved into tier 4. I spent Christmas completely on my own. That's not a sad tale compared to the tales of so many people. To think a voice coach thought it was fine to jump on a train, travel down in a mask in order to deliver a service that could easily be done by Zoom. Do you need a voice coach in order to deliver a speech about something on COVID? I don't think you do. It's about the substance, not about the delivery. I honestly, on this one, I think it's absolutely baffling that poor Labour MPs like Melanie are being sent out to defend this line, which is completely indefensible.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But my shock is that it is the BBC who is actually having this debate. And I will repeat, while it wasn't on the main news channel, I will give Victoria Derbyshire credit for doing that on Newsnight. She is turning that show around unbelievably against all odds. And I would say to all of those other presenters, like, well, you see them all there, Mateless, Brand, Sam Coates, Kevin Maguire, Robert Peston, Beth Rigby, why are you staying silent? You cannot think this was the most important story in the world when it applied to Boris Johnson, and it is not even worthy of a mention when it applies to Keir Starmer. Now, Charlie Sansom, I know we are completely aligned when it came to lockdowns. You left the Conservative Party as a result of this madness. And I should remind everyone, I am not for a single second saying that I believed in any of these rules or regulations. I didn't follow them. They were a farce. They destroyed the country. But the point is, it was Starmer who was Mr. Pious. It was Starmer who wanted to destroy other lives if they did not follow the rules. And to me, the complete willful blindness from the media over this just exposes them as activists rather than journalists, which is why I do think that was quite a moment last night on Newsnight. And I hope people realise that even though I am usually highly critical of the BBC, if people are prepared to do something good in the mainstream media, I will point it out too.
Well, if you're praising the BBC, they must have done something quite phenomenal.
Owl's just frozen over.
Yeah, exactly that. There's some pigs flying as well. Don't tell David Cameron. And what I would say about the comparison between what happened during COVID with Boris and this is obviously at the time it was heightened and everyone was excited by COVID, scared by it, over embellishing it. And obviously I left because I saw what was duplicitous government, really. You know, we can do one thing, you can't, and Keir Starmer's done exactly the same. I wonder if he can get his money back on that voice coach, though, because if that is to serve the country in any way, shape, or form, you know, it beggars belief. He's so boring and so monotone. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine that voice coach that leaving a session going, "I've done a good job today." There's no way.
No, so why was she there? Why was she there on Christmas Eve 2020 when Starmer was posting pictures, making it out as if he was just spending time with his family? Luca, the official Labour Party narrative is now that she was actually more than just a voice coach. She was a key part of Starmer's preparation to deliver this address on Brexit. Are you buying any of it?
No. Well, I do believe she was the voice coach. Keir Starmer clearly needs a voice coach, clearly needs people to try and get him to speak like a normal human being. But it does seem a bit suspicious now. And I think the problem he has is that he was such a zealot about the rules and he went after absolutely everyone, especially Boris Johnson. I think fairly. I mean, Johnson made the rules, so it's only fair that he had to stick to them about not following the rules. So that means he's just set himself up now to be scrutinized, that every single move he made, did he perfectly keep the rules like he was telling everyone else should do? So I think it's hypocrisy from him if he has broken the rules, or if he did do things at the margin, which is perhaps what will transpire from this thing, where technically maybe it was allowed, but clearly against the spirit of the rules. So yeah, not a good look from Starmer.
Well, no, of course not, because just a reminder, this is what he was telling us all at the time.
It's very important that whatever the rules are, everybody follows them. So I say follow the government advice. Whatever tier you're in, follow the rules. It's very important that we all say that, the government and the opposition.
I mean, Charlie, it still blows my mind that we just accepted that. I mean, I never did, but the vast majority of the population literally bought in to that level of control from our leaders. It's so horrifying. Yeah. Charlie, I do wonder, though, and actually, I'm interested to know if there's a generational divide here between the two of you. Do we have any right, as the British public, to know about Keir Starmer's personal life? Does it matter that he hasn't been straight with us about the shape of his family, for example? Does it matter that we don't know what was really going on in his troubled marriage to Lady Victoria when she disappeared from the campaign trail for all of that time until Lord Ali started throwing money at her for clothes? I mean, do we have a right to know that, given he is Prime Minister?
Who do you want to start with first? Me?
Yeah, you kick off, Charlie.
I suppose I'm a bit 50-50, because I think that if you are a good politician, and there are very few of those, but if you are a good politician and the media do what the media does, then you have your whole life turned upside down unnecessarily. I think a private life is... it's tricky for me, actually. I think, me personally, I like to keep my family outside of my political opinions and my views, because I think that, you know, why should they be tarred with the same brush as me? Because I'm quite happy to be outspoken, no pun intended. And, you know, maybe they're not. So I think there is an element of family privacy. There should be some. And to get more to the point, what do people really care about? They care about getting a doctor's appointment. They care about being seen at the hospital when they've got a serious illness. They care about the police turning up. They care about driving down the road without puncturing their car tyres. They care about not being stabbed when they walk down the street in London. That's what they care about. So whether or not the Prime Minister's got 20 kids by 20 different women, that's entirely up to him. Can he do the job? That's what we should be focused on.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's an interesting point. And Luca, I mean, I don't agree with that, by the way. I think as Prime Minister, we do actually have a right to know. But I'm interested because I get the sense that the younger generations actually don't give a damn about the personal lives of their leaders and don't give a damn that you don't know the names of Starmer's children.
Well, I don't want to speak for my whole generation, but I don't give a damn, to be honest, about if what his named his children, or I mean, maybe if he had 20 kids from 20 women, that would be something that might be interesting. But other than that, I think if you want to have the top people go into politics, leave successful careers elsewhere, and get themselves into Parliament, which we should all want, because that ultimately gets better governance, then you need to make it attractive to go into politics, especially at the high level. And if going into politics means people snooping around your private life, potentially putting your kids in danger, because we know, look, we just started today talking about the case in Southport, and we know also with David Amos, there are dangerous people out there who will target people. And I think it's sensible for a father to wish to protect his children, to not want to have them in the public eye. It's not their fault that their father's prime minister. And also when it comes to his wife, as long as there's been no law breaking or anything like that, I don't think it's in the public interest to know about our leaders' private lives. And ultimately, if there is snooping, I think all that will do is put good people off going into politics.
Yeah, I mean, look, I sort of get that. I would argue that what went on during that COVID era was completely different because these politicians...
That complicates things. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because these politicians were literally playing with our lives. They were literally stopping me seeing a relative just before she died. To me, that is unforgivable. And the fact that Starmer thought he needed his glamorous actress voice coach in the room with him on Christmas Eve. You know, I look, if all of us hadn't been put through that hell, I would understand it. But I guess that's why there was such outrage, for example, about Matt Hancock having the affair and he had to go, because it was just an extraordinary period of time. And I think we should all learn from that we should never again accept politicians taking that much control over our lives. But do stand by, Luca Watson and Charlie Sansom, because I promised some fun today, and this is fun. A TV cat fight, has broken out between Kay Burley, who's just departed Sly News, and Camilla Tominey of GB News. I'll tell you what they both said in just 1 minute, so don't go anywhere. Plus, the big reveal of today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Get your votes in right now on the live chat. But first, did you know that sleeping less than 6 hours per night doubles the risk of early death? Poor sleep is also linked to obesity, heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, depression, and a weakened immune system. Now, I've struggled with sleep for a while, actually. I tried everything, but found it difficult to wind down and sometimes lay my head down on that pillow before 2 a.m. And I'm not alone. The CDC reports over 35% of adults in the US sleep less than the recommended 7 hours. Many sleep supplements contain melatonin and other ingredients that cause dependencies, morning grogginess, and actually lose their effectiveness over time. So that's why I now take Evening Bean, a brand new product by Verso. After 3 years of protecting the formula, they created a melatonin-free drink mix with clinically studied, patented ingredients. It's formulated to calm an active mind, help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and improve deep and REM sleep, all without creating dependencies or causing morning grogginess. Now, I actually look forward to drinking my Evening Bean every night, not only because it helps me fall asleep faster without having to get up in the middle of the night, but I wake up easier too. And it tastes so good. It's actually become my new nightcap. And don't worry, if you're vegan or on a keto diet, it's absolutely perfect to fit in with all of that. So click the link in the show description or head on over to buy.ver.so/outspoken and use the coupon code outspoken at checkout to save 15% on your first order. Try Evening Bean tonight and you'll wake up feeling refreshed tomorrow. Let me just repeat the address for you. buy.ver.so/outspoken and use the coupon code outspoken at checkout to save 15%. But now, back to the show. Breaking right now, an extraordinary TV catfight has broken out between Kay Burley, who I revealed had been axed from Sly News after 30 years yesterday, and her GB News rival, Camilla Tominey. Now, in the left-wing press, this has been branded Camilla Tominey's unsisterly farewell. And Kay Burley, not one to hold back, let me tell you, I know from my own personal experience, posted on X, "Sweetie Camilla Tominey, as the late great Madeleine Albright said, there is a special place in hell for women who don't support other women." Camilla wasn't taking that lying down though, posting this picture of Kay Burley. Do you remember when she seemed to strangle fellow journalist outside a court case and writing, yes, as this photographer can vouch. So what was it that Camilla Tominey said to get Kay Burley so riled up? Well, in the Telegraph, where she writes, she headlined the piece, Farewell Kay Burley, TV's answer to Liz Truss. Now, I think Liz Truss is great, so actually, maybe that's a compliment. But it was clear that that isn't what Camilla went, because she went on to say she let every gaffe wash over her like lettuce in a salad spinner. From empty chairing then Conservative Party Chair James Cleverly, despite him not actually being scheduled to appear on her show, to responding to the terrorist attacks in Paris in 2015 with a picture of a dog with sadness in her eyes, she embraced her Ron Burgundyisms with admirable gusto. I've always been something of a Wigan street fighter, she once boasted, in the style of Lisa Nandy after 6 pints of lager and a packet of crisps. And who could really disagree when she famously described a Scottish independence campaigner as a bit of a knob? Not always the most Sicily of journalists, in 2008, the twice-divorced mother of one reportedly grabbed a female photographer by the throat after being hit in the face with a camera. Is this heavyweight departure a reflection of the fact that even no-nonsense Burley could no longer put up with the channel's seemingly endless diet of biased Israel coverage and climate change scaremongering? Or perhaps she simply couldn't bear being repeatedly whipped in the ratings by arch-rivals GB News? Now, Camilla Tominey went on to say that Burley's former colleague Adam Bolton once told Newsnight that regulator Ofcom, the off-communists as I call them, should shut down GB News for disrupting Britain's broadcast ecology. Yet, Camilla went on, the late-night BBC Current Affairs show has been forced to slim down to 30 minutes, while last week Sky News announced a move to premium content to face off its linear decline. One of Britain's broadcast ecology's great oaks has been felled, but what if a tree falls and no one is there to hear it? But then Victoria Derbyshire got involved too. The Newsnight host absolutely furious with Camilla Tominey too, claiming that her show's ratings were not in decline. So here are 3 of the big female beasts of the mainstream media going at each other. Let me bring in my superstar panel now, Charlie Sansom and Luca Watson. I mean, Charlie, I found this one particularly hilarious because having worked in the mainstream media for 20 years before I was cancelled, I know that these women all hate each other, despise each other, Charlie. And finally, that's emerging in public. Whose side are you on? Kay Burley or Camilla Tominey here?
Well, I've never really liked Kay Burley. I've never seen the appeal. One thing I would say about her is she doesn't look as old as she is, which is a compliment. But as I've said in your show before, you can't trust people that cut their hair using a salad bowl. So that goes against her.
Okay, Luca Watson, what about you? Was this unfair of Camilla Tominey to go for Kay Burley on the day after she had effectively been axed from her role?
Well, I don't know about unfair, but it's a pretty low blow, I think. And look, I have no dog in this fight or cat in this cat fight. And I don't know why they've got this sort of personal drama between them. But I do think it was a pretty low blow, especially the little snide comments like twice divorced and things like that. Didn't seem very professional to me.
It is interesting, though, when you look at that wider question about the mainstream media. I guess the one area where I would say Camilla maybe shouldn't be so smug, Charlie, is that she is an absolute mainstream media person. And if you look at the Daily Telegraph, they're struggling too. Very few people are listening to her new podcast, The Daily Tea, despite huge investment, huge innovation. GB News is losing money hand over fist. I mean, it's very easy for Camilla Tominey to look over at Kay Burley and laugh, but I would argue that GB News and the Daily Telegraph, while being 2 of the more sound organisations within the mainstream media, are also going to be facing their own challenges.
Of course. I mean, I'll give it 12 months before they start monetising their X account and calling it a day. You know, the mainstream media, I've never understood how they can lose money because everyone watches it. Everyone gets invested in the lies they tell and the propaganda, and somehow, I mean, they make no money. I heard somewhere a long time ago that Sky News hasn't turned a profit since it was initially launched. How has it gone on for so long? I don't understand. I mean, look, the more these channels fail, the better for us, because people who go online and put their heads above the parapet and take criticism from left, right, and centre, like you have, and friends that we've got in common have, like, that's good, because we're genuine and honest. We have genuinely held opinions and we want to do some good stuff. These people are just paid off and they're doing what they're told to do, and we all know that. So the sooner they get gone, the better.
100%. I mean, completely corrupted because they all work for billionaires. I mean, remember, Kay Burley used to be considered on the right when she was employed by Rupert Murdoch, and Sly News was a Murdoch channel. Then the moment there was a change in ownership and Concast, as Donald Trump calls it, took over, Burley all of a sudden went woke and gave into that left-wing brigade. I think the really important thing about the types of media that we're all doing now is that we just tell it as we see it, and we don't try and hide our points of views, and we're not funded by billionaires as well, which means that we're far less likely to be corrupted. I do find it hilarious, though, because I feel like the mainstream media, you know, on the Titanic, and you've got the band, and they just kept playing as the ship went down, playing the violins. I feel like there's a bit of that going on, because the RTS Awards, which is like the most wanky, awful group of people who all think the same way, announced their nominations yesterday. And their nominations for the best network daily news program of the year were genuinely Channel 4 News, ITV News, and The World with the elder Hakeem at Sky News. I've got examples of them to show you in a moment. And the political journalist of the year, Charlie, this was the one I couldn't believe. Paul Brand of Woke ITV, Beth Rigby of Sly News, and Sam Coates from Sly News. They were the three people nominated.
I mean, look, I'm a Politico and I don't watch any of them. So what does that tell you? I mean, if they want to pat themselves on the back and say we deserve an award for being the best news show and the best political podcast or whatever they're going to win their awards for, I'm not interested. I'm sure you're not interested. I'm sure Luca's not interested. And I'm sure your viewers aren't interested. So, you know, well done. But that's as far as it goes.
I do think there has been a particular meltdown, though, far bigger than ever over the past few days in terms of Donald Trump. And I wanted to show you two examples that I picked up last night, because I find it totally astonishing that these channels and these broadcasters genuinely claim to be impartial, genuinely claim to be regulated by the off-communists, where they are not meant to take a political position. And remember, in the case of Woke ITV as well, they are a public broadcaster, which means they should not be taking a political position. But when it comes to Donald Trump, they just cannot help themselves. So the first example of this, and my God, it riled me last night, and I have to say it riled lots of you too, because there's been a huge reaction to this, but it was part of an exchange between Tom Bradby and Robert Peston. Watch.
Well, look, we've often talked, haven't we, about what Keir Starmer is going to do if Donald Trump more and more departs from the values, frankly, that we as nations have shared pretty much harmoniously, give or take, you know, since the Second World War and indeed before that. Things like this really do seem to suggest a fork in the road. But how does Keir Starmer handle that?
And I mean, as I say, this post is going totally viral, but I thought I would share what Winston Marshall had to say about this, where he responded saying the British MSM are at best unreconstructed globalist Blairites. They still don't understand Trump. They still don't understand Brexit. They still don't understand worldwide populist revolution. They still don't realise their worldview is completely crumbling, Charlie Sansom.
I would agree. I mean, since Trump got into office again, I've noticed some positivity around the world. There has been this upheaval of upsurge, even of goodwill, and I think that the media in this country, the media abroad, they're all going to get in line eventually. They're all going to get in line eventually, because you've seen how corporations have ditched some of their DEI stuff and they've got rid of the woke directives.
Even Google has today.
Yeah, it's incredible. And that's the Trump effect. And it goes to show how important America is as a country. It is the most important country on earth, and it can change the way the world operates. And it's showing that right now.
where do you stand, Luca Watson, on the mainstream media meltdown over Donald Trump?
Well, I actually read that clip a bit differently. I think it shows that they do understand that their worldview is crumbling, and that's what he was alluding to. The fact that Donald Trump doesn't share the values of the post-war order that have reigned from roughly 1945 between Britain, America, and most of the West. They recognize that he is not somebody who believes in many of the institutions that were set up in the post-war order. And I think it's created an element of confusion. Okay, where is the world going now? What should Britain do? Do we try and stick to it, which seems to be what Starmer's doing, and insist that no, we will absolutely keep to these institutions and so on? Or are we forced now to change with the times and try and keep up with whatever Trump is doing, which I think we can all say is pretty erratic. We never know from one day to the next exactly what he's going to be announcing. So I think it shows that the mainstream and the post-war order is now crumbling. People recognize that, but are still confused as to what exactly to do next.
Well, that's
do you really think erratic?
Oh, sorry,
sorry to cut in there. I was wondering what you find erratic about him, Luca. I think that you can just expect common sense now.
Well, I don't think anyone was expecting him to announce that the US was going to take over Gaza and have it as a some sort of colony to
Okay,
run
yeah,
back.
I'll give you that.
This is what I mean. I don't think even Netanyahu was expecting it, and he was sitting next to him.
He was delighted, though.
He was
this
just as shocked
is
as everyone
what
else.
has prompted this meltdown. And I mentioned Sly News in this show, The World. And again, what I want you to do is just listen really closely to the language used. And remember, these are meant to be impartial news presenters. Watch.
Now, of course, we know the US president is a real estate man at heart. For him, foreign policy is partly about expansion and aggression. But we also know from his first term in office that he prefers to adopt the so-called madman theory, behaving like he's capable of just about anything, saying crazy things. The more outlandish, the better, to force leaders to take action. He's 3 weeks into Trump 2.0, and we're starting to get used to this daily circus.
So a circus, and he's a madman, Charlie Sansom, according to Sly News.
Well, if he's a madman, then I'd vote for him. Maybe that makes me a madman too, but I like the direction that he's taking America in. I don't think he says crazy, outlandish things to get world leaders to do what he wants. I just think he's strong. I think he has a strong approach, and it's very much taking no prisoners, which is what America needs. He's putting America first, which is what the Americans voted for, and that's what they should get. If only we had leaders here that did the same thing for us, it would be a miracle if we did. But Trump's doing all the things that the Americans want. Canada folded overnight, Mexico folded. I did find the Gaza thing a little bit eyebrow-raising, because it plays into what a lot of people think about that conflict, which is that it was pretty much allowed to happen for this strip of land to be demolished, for somebody to come in and take it over. I think most people thought it would be Israel. Now we know it's going to be America. It doesn't sit right with me, the Gaza thing, but, the guy's getting things done, and that's what the Americans voted for.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I love the ambition. I love the ambition. I love the idea that we just don't do the same thing time and time again, because quite frankly, it hasn't worked, has it? It never worked. But look, absolutely brilliant to have you both today. Thank you so much to my superstar panel, Charlie Sansom, host of X Uncensored on Spaces, and Luca Watson, the author of Luca's Substack. And thank you so much for your company today. Actually, lots of interesting feedback coming in from you. And I was really fascinated by this on Starmer, by the way, and talking about why Starmer has done this secret visit to Southport. And Straight Outta Cornwall wrote, I don't think he's evil. I think he's on the spectrum and has no moral compass. He's transfixed with rules. Get him out now. But Becca Stephanie wrote, if it was my child who was killed or hurt in that awful massacre, I would never speak to this evil man. And Helen Shepherd, I love what you're getting at here. He could have seen his voice coach over Zoom. He didn't have to see her in person unless she was there for other reasons. Now, Greatest Britain, Uni and Jackass time. It's been tighter than I expected today, actually. Let me remind you of the nominees as I reveal who has won. In third place, you haven't gone with me today, Meghan Markle, nominated by @JFDTA for her stupid Billie Eilish t-shirt post, Just So Tone Deaf. In second place, Kemi Badenoch with 22% of the vote, nominated by Northy Vitch for doing the least she could at PMQs yesterday, but with 60% of the vote. And our union jackass this Thursday, Rachel Reeves, nominated by Amanda Louise, 77, for ruining our economy. Now, you know we do something really exciting for Friday, so I will launch this poll in the community very, very soon. And what we do is we put all 4 nominees for Union Jackass, as in the 4 winners of Union Jackass from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and they compete head-to-head to be named Union Jackass of the Week. So I can just remind you, this is going to be a really interesting contest this week, because we have the Woodhill Governor, Nicola Marfleet. She, of course, of Tommy Robinson fame, but then 3 big Labour beasts, Angela Rayner, Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves. So go to the community soon after the show and I will launch that poll and will announce tomorrow the worst Britain in the world this week. Coming up, though, in the Uncancelled After Show, remember we moved to Substack, www.outspoken.live. A major development in this legal case between Prince Harry and the Heritage Foundation, as it looks like a judge may well release his immigration documents. Plus, there is a real clue in this Meghan Markle Instagram disaster, which potentially gives some rise to speculation about her marriage. Royal YouTube sensation, according to Taz, is standing by. We will have that discussion on Substack, www.outspoken.live. So at this stage, we move off YouTube and Rumble, move to Substack to host the Uncancelled After Show. And we are back live tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hit subscribe right now if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble. Oh my goodness, though, I've just realized I forgot to name the Greatest Britain. And that would have been terrible, because this was a great nomination from Muriel MBE. And it is Sharon Davies, because she has been going through hell fighting for women's rights in sport. And actually, I just wanted to show you in regards to this. Sorry, I totally forgot I was going to do this earlier, but I really wanted to show you Donald Trump and what happened yesterday at the White House when he signed this executive order ensuring that the rights of women, biological women in sport would be protected, because I think it shows just how out of touch the way Sly News and Woke ITV present them. Watch this.
If you'd like to gather around me, I think I'm going to be okay. Come on. Come on. Hello. Secret Service is worried about them? If we have to worry about them, we have big problems. Okay, do you want to do this? Watch what I do, and then I'm going to give you some pens, okay? Are you ready? What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor? You ready? We'll do a good job. Wait, let me press that. I want to make this a really good signature, because this is, this is a big one, right? Oh, I think we have a 10. We have a 10.
God bless you, Mr. President.
Now, isn't that funny? Because that is the side of Trump, and that beautiful moment is the type of thing from Trump that you never see in the mainstream media. You literally just never see it. And Sharon Davies is a real hero of mine. I adore the woman. She has fought such an important fight for women's sport. Anyone who has followed my story on this knows I'm incredibly passionate about this. I love women's sport. I support my London Pulse girls at the netball. And thank goodness that Trump is bringing some sanity to this issue of protecting women's sport. So once again, thank you for your company. Back live tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. If you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, please hit subscribe. Most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you, and I will see you on the after show on Substack, I hope, in just one moment.